You are listening to the audio description Narrators of America Know Your Narrator series.
Today, we are honored to have Rick Boggs join us. Rick is a SAG-AFTRA actor, a voiceover professional, an audio description provider, an audio engineer, a musician, a performer, a speaker, an entrepreneur, a visual artist, a teacher, and owner of Audio Eyes, the organization which he created that includes other talented blind audio professionals. Now, Audio Eyes has a history of firsts, including the first to describe the Blue Man Group, the first company to use audio effects to illustrate abstract images, the first company to use crowdsourced funding for video description, now called audio description, the first company to employ more than 2 descriptive voices in a film, the first company to include blind professionals in the production process, and now we have another first to share. Rick, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Roy. Pleasure to be here.
Boy, there's a lot of lists of firsts here. What do you got? How do you feel about Audio Eyes and all the pioneer spirit that you bring to your company?
Your summary of it sounds pretty exciting. I'm thinking, yeah, I want to be a part of that. First of all, I'm a very fortunate person, and that was very frequently the subject of a lot of public speaking that I did, particularly during the 90s. I had a topic that challenged people's ideas of who was fortunate and unfortunate, because when you're totally blind in society and people who have never met a blind person meet you, they usually feel that they are more fortunate than you are simply by the fact that they can see and you cannot. I think having a rich life of all kinds of experiences, good, bad, and everything in between, makes a person fortunate. And that's where I fall.
Very cool. Do you notice that kind of bias that sighted people have, that just the sighted world, society itself, has a major effect in the entertainment industry specifically?
I think the entertainment industry is largely comprised of creative people who have a knack, or at least a desire, to tell stories. And they're people like any other people. They have misconceptions about some ideas, and they're right on about other ideas. They have expertise in some areas, and other areas they need to find an expert. So yeah, I think that individuals' life experience does influence the stories they tell and how they tell them. And telling stories about disability or blindness is no different in that regard.
And obviously, one of the more recent examples of celebrating stories as far as film goes is the Oscars. And recently, the stories of the actual Oscars themselves have recently changed.
I'm really proud, very happy, and once again, just plain fortunate to have been selected to provide live audio description for the Oscars, the Academy Awards, for the very first time. It's an unexpected story, but I find a lot of times the general population that doesn't work in film and television really don't have any idea of how things come to be. And the stories are pretty diverse. I try to explain to people there's no one way that a deal happens in Hollywood. If you're going to make a film, or if you're going to try to be on camera or on a microphone, or be involved, as they say, below the line or behind the scenes or whatever, there's no one way that your deal comes together. And I believe it's about being in the right place at the right time with the right stuff. It's kind of something I remember from a book from Stephen King called Dance Macabre from Stephen King. And Stephen King would say that you can control whether you have the right stuff, and you can be in the right place. The right timing, he says, that's up to the gods, as he would say. In this situation, I think it's a perfect fit. I think that's exactly what happened. I personally did not pursue from the beginning the opportunity to describe the Academy Awards. I'm sure I was aware that the Academy Awards were not being described. The fact is, there's only been a handful at most attempts to describe anything live with a live describer in the United States. Most of your audience will know audio description is generally provided for pre-recorded materials. So a description company like Audio Eyes has the opportunity to write a script, review the script, record the voiceover, and fix anything, edit it, make it clean, make it fit, put it together, and then put it out or publish it. In live description, a person who's received extensive training on how to describe something live has to make decisions about what's the most important thing at that moment to describe. And they have to become experts at choosing appropriate language to be very descriptive, but very, very succinct. One basic difference is in video description, where you're describing pre-recorded media, you describe in complete sentences. In live description, usually it's very note-takey, as we say, it's fragments. Like every other description company in the United States, AudioEyes does not have a long history of providing live audio description, because while there is a lot of live description in the United States, it's generally for venues that have live performances, stage, and the like. Live description for broadcast is what's rare.
So one of the cool things that sounds like is happening is that because this is a first for AudioEyes to do the Oscars, and it's a first for the Oscars to have audio description, there must have been a lot of assumptions. How did you run your company to get prepared? How did you tell your voice talents and your writers to get prepared for this? Did you have materials ahead of time? Did you look at previous Oscars? What was your approach to get ready, since you had such limited time to get ready?
Thank you for pointing out the fact that we had really little time.
Oh no.
I think we had less than 2 weeks from the time we were confirmed that we were going to do this to the time we actually had to do it. What I told my staff was, hey guys, great news. We get to describe the Academy Awards. The bad news is we have to describe the Academy Awards. I'd say that because live audio description for broadcast has not been a huge success story in this country. And I felt like we were kind of being set up for potential disaster, and I didn't want that to happen. Now, as far as preparing to actually do it, once again, I'm very fortunate. I've always said that one of the best business decisions I have ever made was to hire Terry Grossman when I started the company back in 2002. I literally believe that Terry Grossman is the finest audio describer in the United States. I think that is demonstrable by the breadth of her experience in multiple genres. You can find audio describers that have written as much description for video as Terry has written, and you can find audio describers who have done as much live audio description as Terry has done. But good luck trying to find somebody who has as much experience as she does in both of those categories, as well as others, museum exhibits, cruise ships, and other things. She has a huge breadth of experience. I still want to say, though, Terry Grossman is not the best audio describer because of her experience. I think Terry Grossman is the best audio describer because more than any other audio describer I have heard, and I've heard a lot, she really understands what the blind person's experience is without the description. She has learned to listen to a program and understand, oh, the blind person gets this, but they don't get this. I need to fill in what they don't understand. She has a very keen sense of what needs to be described and what doesn't. And that's what makes her, in my opinion, the best describer there is. She does it in a premeditated and calculated sort of way when she does it for pre-recorded material, but she has to do it off the cuff, spontaneously when she does it as a live describer. She has described the Rose Parade along with Jolie Mason and Los Angeles Radio Reading Service for well over 20 years, maybe approaching 30 years now. She has been describing live stage shows in Los Angeles through her Audio Description Los Angeles organization for probably just as long, 20 years or more. Meanwhile, she's been writing scripts for described media for AudioEyes since 2002, and she's done thousands of titles. So having Terry Grossman in our staff made staff preparation for this much simpler because she's already trained our staff, our audio describers, and we already have in-house describers that she has trained specifically for live description, because we have provided those services for other companies. They're just not broadcast companies. So
let me jump in there if I could, Rick. When it comes to Terry Grossman and her approach, and this is a total setup, I'm already anticipating your answer. This is why I'm asking you the question. So with that disclaimer, when it comes to Terry, a sighted person doing among yeah, as you said, like the best audio description writer and voice talent out there when it comes to her approach, because she understands. Did she do that on her own, or was she actively engaged in making sure that her audience, the blind audience, is getting what they need?
Terry developed her expertise by working with and around blind people for her entire career. I've heard her make this statement in public in front of audiences that it has been working directly with blind people giving her feedback over and over, program after program, for live and for recorded, being accountable to blind people. When we have our QC sessions at Audio Eyes and the writers present their first draft of a script and a blind person listens to it and they make their comments about, I do need that, I don't need that, this works and that doesn't work. If you get exposed to that for long enough and you listen with an open mind, you learn a lot. And Terry will testify to that over and over. And so I know that's where she got her expertise. And I think that's why she's as good as she is.
When it comes to that feedback that's so integral to sighted professionals, it is very clear to me that what you're saying is nothing about us without us. Am I reading
I
between
think
the
that's
lines here?
really key in audio description. If someone wants to either measure the quality of an example of audio description, or if they want to produce quality description, they can't really do that without including input from a professional blind person who has experienced a lot of description and received some kind of training about how you write description. I think the key for an audio describer is to receive input from a blind professional, which is a blind person who's been exposed to a lot of audio description. We're talking hundreds of programs, and has received training of the nature that an audio describer receives. In other words, just a blind person off the street, so to speak, who happened to encounter description a couple of times, really isn't educated and experienced enough to be an expert providing feedback to someone producing description. But a blind person who's heard hundreds of described programs and who has been trained so that they understand the limitations, the restrictions, the various aspects that go into describing something, how choices are made and what choices they have and what the parameters are, that blind person is invaluable and is actually necessary for someone that wants to provide quality description, in my view.
Wow. So if we go back to the preparation for the Oscars, we're at 14
Okay.
days, 13 days, 10 days, 7 days. It's coming down to the wire. What were the last few days like at your company, the weekend of the Oscars?
The last few days, as the clock was running down and we were going to have to go live on broadcast television with no opportunity to do any
Oh,
redos,
geez.
as they say, was building tension, anticipation, looking over your shoulder. Did I remember everything? Do I have everything? Have we done everything we can do to be prepared? Looking at pop culture, social media, the films that we were aware either would be nominated or should be nominated or might be nominated, and the actors and significant players in the entertainment industry who would likely be at the event, or who some of whom we knew already would be at the event, that sort of thing. You look at who's who and what are they involved in, and the live describers that we assigned to this were people that have watched the Academy Awards numerous times, so it wasn't new in terms of the style of show and how it would be. But sure, you do your homework and you kind of look at pop American culture or whatever, and just make sure that you're up to date on the latest trends and the latest buzz about what's happening in the business. And Terry Grossman and Sarah Ehrman, I are the right people for that. I knew I had the staff that had the experience and had the connection to either pop culture or media in America, that it wouldn't be monumental for them to suddenly get up to speed, but that anybody that was going to do this was going to have to get on the internet and do some homework and look at things. For our two audio describers, Terry and Sarah, there was nothing they could do that was literally preparation for the description they were going to deliver. In other words, they could not start working on descriptions ahead of time because they had no idea what they were going to see. And we knew that this particular Oscars event was going to be different because of the pandemic. It was going to have a different approach. It was going to be different in a way that no other show has been different. So we had to wait for rehearsals. And as it turns out, there would be two rehearsals, one the day before the event and one the morning of the Oscars event. And then, of course, the Oscars event that evening. So with the two rehearsals, Terry and Sarah watched a quote unquote run through of the program and took notes about what they saw and how they wanted to describe it as best they could with stuff flying by. They had surprises thrown at them that there was going to be subtitles that they were going to have to read and did not have separate documents, to look at. They had to read it from the screen as it flew by. It wasn't some kind of prepared document that they were handed and said, by the way, there are going to be subtitles and here's what they are. That would have been nice. But as we learned, and we did learn a lot about how the Oscars are put together from this, as we learned, even the Academy themselves didn't have those things. There was nobody had them in a way that they could provide those in advance. And those clips that you see, those are being put together very, very hurriedly at the last minute. There was no opportunity to review those clips before the actual run through of the program. So it was tension, it was speed, it was how can we do, and yet there's so much we cannot do. We had another component that was really nerve-wracking for me and the rest of my staff, in that we decided that we wanted to be as inclusive as possible, which is the brand position of AudioWise. We always want to be as inclusive, both in our employment policies and in our sort of public-facing communications with consumers. So we decided that we wanted to give blind people the opportunity to comment on the description live during the show while it was happening. There was a lot going on here, again, that were firsts. 5.5 hours of continuous live description has certainly never been done. But there's also never been an opportunity for blind people to comment to the live describer while they're doing their job. And we decided we wanted to do that. So preparing for the social media aspect of this in those last few days was really hairy. Who was going to monitor which social media stream? How were we going to decide which social media comments we reply or respond to? I had to coordinate the staff in terms of what the messaging would be. What do we say to people out there in the public if they ask questions or make comments? What do we say to them? What do we not say to them? And how do we aggregate those comments, since Terry and Sarah cannot describe the Academy Awards while reading thousands, and there were over 3,000 comments submitted while we delivered 5.5 hours of description. How can we summarize those comments and provide them to Terry and Sarah so that when they had a moment, either during a commercial break or in between segments of the show, they could look at them? So there was a lot of sort of chaos and preparation for something that we had never literally done before. And it was intense. It was fun, but it was intense. There were a lot of details. There were messages that our describers needed to deliver during the show. And yet language, of course, always has to be approved by the network. You can't just go on ABC television and say whatever you want. You have to show them, hey, this would be the announcement. There were a few things that I should mention as all of this was coming together that I was impressed by. And I think other people would be also. It could sound kind of self-serving here, or like I'm just trying to pat people on the back who gave us an opportunity, but that's not what it is. I was pleasantly surprised that the staff at the Academy had such a great attitude. They made it very clear over and over that they wanted this to be the best that it could be. It wasn't just check a box for them. And to that end, there were certain things that needed to be taken care of, which I'll explain in a minute. And we had conversations about how to take care of those things. I was also pleasantly surprised that when the Academy suggested to ABC television, hey, we'd like to have the awards described this year, can we do that? That ABC said, if we're going to describe the awards, we're going to describe everything, pre-show, post-show, awards, the full 5.5 hours. The blind audience is going to get everything that everyone else gets, or we're not going to do it. I was really impressed by that. I wouldn't expect that of any network or major studio because they might not necessarily be aware of the need or that that would matter to people. But that was ABC's attitude. And I think there was a synergy there between AudioWise and our disposition that we always want the work to be satisfying to the end consumer. We think that audio description is accountable to the end user, along with the Academy and their desire to make this event the highest quality, best value, most entertaining, and well done program it can be, along with ABC television saying, if we're going to do something, we're going to do it right and we're going to do it with integrity and with quality. I think all three of the entities involved worked really well together and had the same attitude about it. So when we approached how do we solve these problems or meet these needs that I'm about to describe, we were all on the same page. So what were those special problems or special needs that we had to address? One of them concerns a very common problem in broadcast description, whether it's live or not. And that is that there are many Americans who are not disabled and are not blind who accidentally turn on the second audio program and they hear this crazy voice going, the man in a black coat stands in front of a podium. And these Americans that don't know about audio description become upset sometimes. Why is this person describing everything? I can see this. And they write irritated emails and make phone calls to the description vendor. In our case, AudioWise, we receive emails and phone calls from people saying, why do you guys do this? And can't you turn it off? And we don't need this. And ABC, as I now know, also receives a lot of those kinds of comments. Well, in this situation, as we prepared for describing the Academy Awards, this topic came up. And ABC, right from the beginning, said, Rick, can you guys do anything to help us orient consumers so that we don't get all of these complaints that they're watching something that they don't want? So we agreed that our describers would simply announce during the program that you're listening to a service provided for the blind. And if you don't want to hear these descriptions, use the audio menu of your device to select the main audio channel, language, something like that. But we had to work that kind of language out, make it succinct as possible because we knew we wouldn't have hardly any time to say it, but make it clear as we could, and then describe how often you say that and where you say it. There were other issues too about credits for the description. It actually has been a long-standing convention since WGBH did it during the 90s to identify who developed the description so that the consumer can provide feedback to the appropriate entity. In this case, the audio description was being provided by Vitac and AudioWise, since Vitac was the contracted vendor to ABC, and since AudioWise is a contracted vendor to Vitac. AudioWise and Vitac work hand in hand all the time. They provide the captions, we provide the audio description, and we're partners. So in addition to providing the information about which companies provided the description, in this case, Google stepped up and contributed a pile of money, who knows how much, in a deal with ABC to sponsor the captions and the description. So now there had to be an announcement about the sponsorship, that Google was sponsoring the captions and description for this. So they're paying for it. Vitac and AudioWise are providing it. And then, of course, the identities of the describers themselves, Terry Grossman and Sarah Omenai. These are just some of the things that you have to work out when you're preparing these kinds of things. And you talk about it in the preliminary negotiations, but you can't really settle it until you kind of know the flow of the show and get down to the rehearsal. So these issues are worked out at the very last minute in terms of what are you supposed to say? What do you have to make sure that you say? When do you say it? And what exact language do you use? And you have to stick to that language. These are just some of the things that a lot of people don't recognize are part of the process of preparing and delivering description, and especially live description.
Oh, that's great, Rick. And to hear the collaboration of all the entities, as you said, we're on the same page. Could we talk about that other entity, the fourth entity of the crowd, and that feedback? That you said there were 3,000 comments that came in that were able to be filtered through your team and into the voice talents, the writers that were actually doing this live. Can you talk maybe some assumptions that you had, or maybe some unique aspects of how that came together? In other words, the feedback from the audience and how that had a direct impact on the live production?
I can. I think what we should talk about first is how did the audience become aware that there was description on this program at all?
Yes.
There's always a problem with audio description of notifying the audience that this program is described. I mean, yeah, they came up with that little logo with an AD with sound waves coming off the D or something like that.
Hey, sorry, Rick, I have to interrupt. That AD logo is a visual logo for blind people. Am I getting that right?
That's what I think is hilarious.
Okay. Okay. Didn't mean to interrupt you. I'm so sorry. Please continue.
We're going to notify the blind people that this program has audio description by putting a visual logo on the screen to tell them that they can listen to the audio description. Yeah, that's great. So there's always a problem. And, how do people know? How do they know it's there? In this case, notifying the blind audience was really essential because we wanted them to provide feedback during the program. We wanted the audience to be able to comment during the program itself. Yet time was of the essence. It took so long for this deal to finally become a real deal and for everybody to know who was participating in what role that there wasn't much time to tell people. And this is a problem that happens in Hollywood all the time. As an aside, I would say Americans in general have no idea that TV programs are being produced just barely in time to get to air. And sometimes that is a factor in why they don't get described because the show isn't produced in time to then describe it before you broadcast it. In this situation, we had to get the word out as soon as possible. But when you deal with a TV network that has their own publicity team, there's levels of approval at a huge global conglomerate like Disney or ABC. They have to have so many hands that agree about what they will do, what they won't do, and how they're going to do it, that it's hard. It's hard to get a press release together to say, hey, we're describing this show in case anybody wants to watch it, right? It's hard for a large organization to get that done, get it approved, and get it out very, very quickly. Time was running out as we were getting down to the wire. Now we're talking about the awards were to be broadcast on April 25th. As of April 20th, we still had no public communication that this was going to happen. When you work with a large studio or a TV network, you have to sign non-disclosure agreements, NDAs. You're not allowed to talk about it. They want to control the message, and rightfully so. It's their content. So we can't talk about it until they talk about it publicly. Fortunately, my staff includes people who are pretty social media savvy and active on social media. I wouldn't be one of those, but Serena Gilbert, Chris Snyder, and my wife, Amber Boggs, are all active on social media and know the ins and outs of how to make it work and how to reach out to people. And they were working pretty hard. And between the NFB podcast, the Clubhouse sort of town hall meetings, of which there were more than one, and our staff doing their own magic online, we were able to get over 3,000 comments from blind people. And Audio Eyes is now compiling and preparing a report about the participation of blind consumers in the event through social media. It's really exciting. I was hoping for a 50-50 split based on the history of live audio description in this country. I thought, man, if we could just break even and get, half good comments, half bad comments, I'd feel like it was a success. Turns out, of these thousands of comments that we got, every single comment that was regarding our describers and what they were describing and how they were describing it were positive. And I'm shocked that that was the case, but they were all positive comments about the description itself. There were a fair number of negative comments, but they were of a technical nature, that the local ABC affiliate stations were not passing the description through. So if you were in Minneapolis, you had trouble hearing it. If you were in Reno, if you were in Houston, you couldn't hear it because the station wasn't passing it through, things like that. Or that you could hear it, but it was really, really low. You had to turn your TV all the way up and you could barely hear it, things like that. So there were complaints about the technical aspects. But I'm pleasantly surprised and very proud that the audience really liked it. And they did give us, hey, we would like more costumes and not so much facial expressions or whatever it was. They did sort of direct what they wanted to hear. And I like that. I like, I mean, I want Description to be participatory and accountable to the blind consumer.
Oh, that's great. And it sounds like that participatory element was integral in that feedback that you get, combined with the talents of those those amazing Terry and Sarah combination, plus all the experience that you brought to it. This is just great, Rick. So if you look back now that it's we're doing this interview a few days after the Oscars are done, now that you've probably been able to have your first good night's sleep in weeks, do you feel like there's anything that really stands out that you really like and are super satisfied that you haven't already shared in this interview?
Yes, I think that if I could share with everybody the little debriefing meetings that I had with Terry and Sarah along the way, in between rehearsals and just before the first rehearsal, if people could hear their enthusiasm, their excitement, their dedication, the questions they were asking, the ideas they were having, how thoroughly immersed they were in this, it would put a smile on their face. It did for me. I loved it. I even thought after the first rehearsal, we had a little debriefing kind of thing, a little production meeting, we call it. And I was thinking as it was happening, I wish people could hear this. Just this is how it happens. This is how you put this stuff together. This is how it becomes what it is. And people don't know the process because they're not close to it like that. But it's fascinating to hear these intelligent ladies saying, oh man, well, oh, we never knew this was going to happen. And we saw subtitles coming across. All I was working. And then all of a sudden they're showing a foreign film and I'm seeing subtitles on the screen and they're scrolling too fast. There's no way anybody could read those. And I'm really concerned. We need to ask if there's a document that we can get, or they had concerns like that, or ideas about, well, where can we get it? We need to describe the trophy itself, the Oscar itself, because people have asked, they say they want that, but there's nowhere we can fit that in. What can we do? And they say, is there any way we can post that on our Facebook page or tweet it out there so that people can read it before, after, during, and all that? I mean, ideas like that, which we did do. I just, to hear these ladies working it out and trying to serve people and trying to go, how can we get this to them? And what am I going to do? Sarah asking me, Rick, these people, it's all these interviews and it's a lot of talking back and forth and back and forth. And yet people may have elaborate attire or funny gestures. How much do you want me to trample what the people are saying, to talk over the people in the show, or not, to give these visual elements? For her to ask questions like that and for us to have a conversation about what is really important that you have to talk, even if you have to talk over someone, and what really isn't important. And just having those conversations and seeing their excitement about how to solve the problems in a very, very short amount of time. They had to be, they're finishing rehearsal 8 o'clock on Saturday night, knowing they have to be back there seeing the next rehearsal at 9 o'clock the next morning. And they're driving home in the car, talking to me on the phone about, oh, and we saw this and we didn't see that. And here's a problem. And do you have the language yet for the this and that? All of it was coming together at the last minute like that. It was really something.
Wow, it sounds like it. Yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to share with our audience?
One thing I set out to do before the event occurred was to try to provide some kind of context. Most blind people have probably never heard live audio description. And I feel that based on the mostly negative reactions to previous attempts to provide live broadcast description, I feel like the criticisms of previous attempts to provide live audio description have not always been fair. I think criticisms of previous attempts to do this have been mostly influenced by ignorance, just a lack of awareness of what's involved and the sort of rock and a hard place that a live describer finds themselves between when they do this work. So I wanted to talk about what to expect, what can live description do and what can it not do, and what pressures is an audio describer under to describe something or not describe something, because there are those kinds of things. They are accountable to the network or the producers of the show or any kind of, I'll give an example of a funny one. I mean, this wasn't a live description, but the example I have here is not from a live audio description, but just to show the audience that you never know what pressures there are going to be. You don't know what the live describer has been told to do or not to do. We had a show where we described a man, rightfully, as balding. And his hair was, had a receding hairline that was kind of exaggerated. And it was a significant physical characteristic that helped differentiate him from other characters. And we described it. The network came back to us saying that the production company really objected to this description and they were not going to allow this to go out because that particular actor was extremely sensitive to having attention drawn to his receding hairline, his balding, if you will. And could we please not mention that? You wouldn't think that that would come up, that someone being described would say, hey, don't describe me like that. But it does happen. The most controversial topic in audio description, and this would be a series of shows, Roy, is race and ethnicity. And there are really passionate opinions that are contrary to one another about how to do it. You basically have to decide, are you in this school or that school or the other school? And so it's a very precarious position for any describer to talk about skin color or race or ethnicity or that sort of thing. I've instructed my describers to stay away from describing it unless it's relevant to the plot or the story that's being told, unless it's important, just because it's a no-win situation. Once we describe it, there's going to be arguments about how we did it. And the arguments will come from the person being described, as well as the consumers hearing the description, as well as the employers who produce the show and the distributors who distribute the show. And everybody's going to passionately want something done some other way. So what I'm saying is there are things that influence description that no one would ever think about, and they wouldn't know it's there. So I set out to create a conversation where blind people could talk about it. And that was one of the things that we did in the clubhouse meetings that was really useful. And people really enjoyed having an opportunity to ask questions about what goes into the decisions that you make and why do you do things the way you do them. And I had an opportunity to give specific examples of things you would never imagine that have come up in the 20 years that we've been doing this.
And those challenges, as they continue to come up, for example, the race and identity description versus that previous example you gave of, can we call it AD Rogaine Gate? It seems like each element is having that discussion and finding out, it's really a form of respecting the audience. Even though you may not have the exact answer right now, you are doing your due diligence to make sure that as it evolves, as these changes happen with audio description. I'm assuming, Rick, and correct me if I'm wrong, that when you started doing this decades ago, that there are some differences, and that I think this whole conversation about the Oscars is emblematic of how you and your company have evolved. Not that you were primal when you started, but you've literally changed with the times. And I find it ironic that, that's the one thing that, as you said again with that Stephen King quote, that's the one thing that you can't control is time. And yet here's another aspect of time that you can't control, but you are taking the action and the steps to evolve. This has been a wonderful conversation, Rick. Thank you so much for this. I'm curious, is there a way that people can reach you, or I guess your team on Audio Eyes on social media? Can you share anything there? I'm putting you on the spot.
Absolutely.
Oh, great.
We welcome input always from anybody and everybody. We like to hear what people think, what questions people ask. I always tell prospective clients and people that are just curious, even people that want to work for us, I say, look, consider Audio Eyes to be a complimentary consultant service about audio description. If people want to know anything about audio description, we'll take the time. We'll take the time over email, on the phone, on text, to answer questions and explain things to help people understand what goes into it. So we can be reached through our website, audioeyes.com. We have forms there that you can click on to provide feedback, forms to get quotes for jobs, or email addresses you can write to. People can contact us via email through sales@audioeyes.com. People can reach us via Twitter, AudioEyesAD. That's @AudioEyesAD. People can reach us on our Facebook page. You just go to Facebook and search Audio Eyes. So, and our telephone number, of course, the old telephone, 818-671-6190. So call us, email us, use our forms on our website, use our Facebook page, or use Twitter. That's a lot of ways you can reach out to Audio Eyes, but we're always happy to hear from people. I would like to say one more thing, Roy.
Of course.
Because you talked about the evolution of things and changing over the times, and this is really relevant to what you do and sort of your role in the history of the evolution of audio description. you're right. AudioEyes has continued to evolve and survived huge changes in audio description in many ways. Some technical. When we started, everything was still being done on tape. We were shipping tapes to the network via FedEx. So we
No,
have
I can't. I
survived.
can't even imagine. Go
It's
on.
it's true. We survived the shift from analog tape to digital files over the internet, right? There has been a shift, which I think we contributed to, really. WGBH providing description during the 90s on PBS and in movie cinemas. Luckily, Barry Cronin, the head of WGBH at that time, wanted to be accountable to the consumers and solicited a lot of feedback. And their first decade was delivering description in mostly what I call a clinical fashion. So, like a news reporter, you're detached from the story. Sort of the couple lays on the couch, they kiss. Next scene, the man has a shotgun. He aims and fires. The person's head, flies, whatever it is. So a very much uniform sort of delivery of things, regardless of the scene, was how they started doing it. But they began to evolve. And I think when we started in 2002, under the name We See TV, we emphasized the voiceover artist projecting an emotion that was more consistent with the scene that they were describing. That was based on feedback that we got from ACB conventions, NFB conventions, and other interactions with blindness organizations that we traveled to teach about audio description. And this is where I see a really important role for you, Roy, is that you've been teaching voiceover artists how to describe, how to deliver audio description. I think your participation in the evolution of description pertains to the voiceover aspect of it. You've been teaching voiceover artists how to do what is the most difficult part of audio description voiceover, and that is, how do you turn on a dime? You have one kind of tone and attitude as you see this very sensuous, sexy love scene, and then within minutes, you're describing a very scary, intense scene where somebody gets shot and killed. I can remember an episode of the program called Six that we did for History Channel, where it was exactly that. This particular couple was making out on a couch, and the next scene, one of the persons was shooting the other person. It was an agent situation. Anyway, your role in doing that is just one example of the ways that audio description continues to evolve. And there are people involved in audio description that continue to contribute to the evolution of it.
Thanks, Rick. And it really is an exciting time when it comes to acting with intention and bringing that story to life. That storytelling really doesn't make a difference, even with that nuanced emotion. And I think, as you're aware, my classes do include feedback with paid experts, and those aren't just, again, random random blind people. This is like people who know their stuff, and that's something that I've learned from all our interactions. Is that, as we said earlier, nothing about us without us. I'm a sighted person, and I'm teaching audio description, and that's where I really want to be a facilitator in bringing those experts, so that the feedback that the blind and sighted voice talents that are interested in audio description can get the real feedback. And it's a total microcosm compared to the 3,000 feedback comments that you've gotten, but it really is exciting that it's not just one person, that there are many people that are stepping up and recognizing the value of not only the voice talents, but also the writing and that nuance that's required with that enemy of time. So it's this whole collaboration. And I got to say, Rick, as you experienced with the very few negative comments had to do with I think you said pass through, that any element of audio description, all these 8 to 10 elements off the top of my head that you and I could name,
Mm-hmm.
it's any single one of those, the weakest link can ruin the other 7 elements of care and consideration and professionalism that's brought to it, that it really is all tied together, and everyone is collaborating to the best of their ability to do the best they can. And that's what gets me so excited and passionate. And you're sharing in this story of the Oscars and how it came to be, and the success that you had with it, I think is emblematic of that collaboration that you've built with AudioEyes.
Something that came up in the clubhouse discussions leading up to the Academy Awards was, well, it refers back to what we were talking about of the evolution of audio description. There are factors that determine which way the industry will evolve. Are we going to go completely toward synthetic voices and automated software mixes and things like that? Or is live human voices and hand mixed going to be the norm going forward? Things like that. There are forks in the road in the evolution of audio description that where individuals' efforts and input and advocacy will help determine whether the description goes left or right at those forks in the road. And one of the topics that came up that's really important has to do with the idea of paid experts. I recognize the point of view that the producer of the content, the writer, the producer, the director, have a vision, and that they have a certain right, if you will, to want to advance that vision or communicate that vision effectively to the blind audience, just like they communicated to the sighted audience. To that end, some people believe and begin to advocate that producers, directors, studio executives should be the ones designing, shaping, and writing the audio description because, after all, it's their vision, it's their content, it's their story that's being told. I want to warn everybody against this option, against that kind of turn in this fork in the road, if you will. I want to warn people that you have to be careful what you ask for. Producers, directors, studio executives, distributors of media are no more enlightened about what blindness is and what it's not, and what blind people can do and cannot do, than the average person in the population. Any blind person that goes to a store and asks for a clerk to help them do a little shopping knows what I'm talking about when I say we generally encounter people who have never experienced a blind person and they are bewildered in terms of how to actually help. And some of the instincts that they have to try to help us, like grab our cane and drag us across the street in a direction we don't want to go before they finally ask, where are you going? Well, those people might be directors of TV programs or producers of TV programs. And if you ask them to describe to us what's on the screen, their assumptions about blindness and so forth are going to come out, and they might give you description that tells you the story, assuming that you can't tell. Really, what we need to advocate for is paid experts, consultants. I recommend that the path that we take is encouraging media producers and distributors to use paid experts rather than to take it on themselves. In other words, since producers are already used to the practice of hiring experts, when they do a period piece, if they're going to make a movie about something in the 19th century, they pay experts to make sure that they portray that accurately. If they're going to do a movie about a military operation, they pay experts who know the way military operations really work so that they don't portray it in an artificial way that doesn't seem authentic. Hollywood is used to paying experts for all kinds of things. What I'm saying is, don't advocate that producers write the description. Advocate that producers hire experts in description to make the best description to get the vision of the show across. That is a really important fork in the road that we're at now.
And again, let's bring it back to the AD at the Oscars, that collaboration that you had with the Academy and ABC and your team, that collaboration was the connection that was able to make it so successful, that you've literally modeled. That example of the period piece is great, that when it comes to audio description, it's not a producer throwing on a blindfold for an hour and a half and saying, yeah, good. It's different. That when it comes to parody to sighted audiences, anything less that the sighted audiences get for blind people is discrimination.
Mm-hmm. Well said, Roy. And thank you so much for playing your part and fulfilling your role and your opportunities to help the evolution of audio description be more and more accountable to blind people and inclusive of blind people. I want to thank you for your role in that. And it's been a real pleasure to be able to talk about that with you.
Oh, thanks so much, Rick. Let's continue the conversations, and thank you so much for being a part of this.